So this is the third and final video for week 1 of economics, and we're actually just going to be recapping on scarcity. So if we come up with some definitions of scarcity, so it's been referred to as the excess of human wants over what can be actually produced. And economics is the study of behaviours which is influenced by scarcity. Now with scarcity it leads us to choices. We want to predict consumers' choices, and we want to use these predictions to make better business decisions. What to produce, how much to produce, and what the cost could be. And these limited choices result in decisions about how we actually use things. If we consider consumption being perhaps the act of using goods and services to satisfy wants, what does drive consumer behaviour? How do they make choices? Perhaps thinking about what's the impact of price changes and other attempts on consumption. If we think about it from the production point of view, what are the determinants of business outputs? What's the impact of business decisions and choices? And we already discussed we can't produce everything, and decisions have to be made on what to produce, how to produce, and how to allocate that resource. And we discussed before that resources are limited, and it means our production is also going to be limited. We tend to look at this in terms of the supply of goods and services, and we can't supply everything. We have to make choices about perhaps how we allocate our staff, how we use raw resources, your raw materials, our storage, the time on machines in production. If goods and services were free, it could be argued that consumption will be almost limitless, that nothing will stop our consumption. But actually that isn't the case. We refer to the desire for consumption as a demand for goods and services, and the patterns for demand for goods or services generally fall when the price increases. It's truer of some products than others. Some are known as perhaps very price sensitive, and some are not. So what we'll be doing is actually looking at what influences this pattern and the consumption. Continuing on this scarcity, I think the economics at macro level is about the relationship and pattern between the demand and the supply. It's looking at what the role of business is, what the impact is of consumers, and how the demand and supply can be shaped and changed by businesses. 3 short questions to think about choices. What goods or services should we make? Can we only make a certain amount? So what can we make? We have limited resources. Businesses are also thinking of, well, perhaps how should we produce them? How is it best to make the best use of our resource? The efficient, effective production methods, the choices about the resource allocation. And for whom? Whom should we be producing them for? Thinking of distribution of income, the wages and the profits. Understanding scarcity is really important, and perhaps recognising and dealing with the allocation of scarce resource has to take place, and therefore it's very important in dealing with business decisions. If we look at some definitions of economic activity, they've been described as actions that involve the production, the distribution or consumptions of goods or services. And economic activity can get really complicated very quickly. So business economics will actually help make sense of the complication and to help make good business decisions. And if we look here at this example of the economic activity involved in the selling of pints of milk, just look at all the processes it has to go through. It's a very complex process. Then if we think about the complexity, a decision to buy more or less of a product can actually have significant consequences, and it's particularly true if lots of people are making similar decisions. And there's been examples in the past of perhaps there's been egg scares and salmonellas, made a tremendous difference to the egg industry. And then we had instances of mad cow disease, which had big knock-on processes for those involved in beef. And business economics can actually help us break down this complexity into simpler questions. And one way to do this is distinguish between firm and individual interactions, and the economic systems. We know that a business, it's really important to maximise value because resources are scarce, and because resources are scarce, it forces us to make choices. And choices are made by rational consideration of the options. We think about what the options are and the opportunity costs. And perhaps as businesses, usually we're interested in maximising value in a particular situation for both the consumers and the producers. If we think about the economics approach to business, in tackling this problem of scarcity, well, we consider the meaning of scarcity, production and consumption. Look at the role of the business economist, the study of consumer behaviour, the study of firms. And then we'll be looking through the factors of production, the labour, the land and raw materials, and capital. We'll be thinking about the demand and supply, the actual and potential demand and supply, and what the role is of firms in satisfying that demand. And we'll be looking at the business economist study of the whole supply process. We'll be looking at the macro and microeconomics, and then microeconomics, the balancing of the demand and supply for particular products, how it works, how equilibrium's reached. And on the macroeconomics, the balancing of aggregate demand and supply, and how this has to be stimulated. In the microeconomics, we'll be looking at choice. What do we do? How do we do it? And for whom are we going to do it for? And the choice and opportunity cost. What it really means is opportunity cost. What rational choices are. And what the marginal costs and benefits are. And we'll be looking at the microeconomic choices and the business.